Once upon a time, it was terribly cold. It snowed and was nearly dark, and in the evening, the last evening before Christmas. In this cold and darkness, there walked down the street a poor little girl, bareheaded and with naked feet. It's true, when she left home, she had slippers on, but what good was that? They were very large slippers which her mother had worn. They were too big. The poor little thing lost them as she scuffled away across the street, avoiding two carriages that rolled by dreadfully fast. One slipper was nowhere to be found. The other had been grabbed by a rascal, and he ran off with it. He thought it would make a fantastic cradle when he someday should have children himself. So the little maiden walked on with her tiny naked feet that were quite red and blue from cold. She carried a quantity of matches in an old apron, and she held a bundle of them in her hand. Nobody had bought anything from her the whole livelong day. No one had given her a single penny. She crept along trembling with cold and hunger, the very picture of sorrow, the poor little thing. The flakes of snow covered her long, fair hair, which fell in beautiful curls around her neck, but that she never really gave a thought. From all the windows the candles were gleaming, and it smelt so deliciously of roast goose, for you know, it was Christmas Eve. Yes, she did think of that. In a corner formed by two houses, of which one advanced more than the other, she seated herself down and cowered together. She had drawn her little feet up close to her, but she grew colder and colder. She didn't even consider going home, for she had not sold any matches and could not bring back any money. She would certainly get blows from her father. At home, it was cold too. Even though the largest cracks were stopped up with straw and rags, the wind whistled through the roof above. Her little hands were almost numbed with cold. Oh, a match might make a big difference! If she only dared to take a single one out of the bundle, draw it against the wall, and warm her fingers by it. She pulled one out. Wow! How it blazed! How it burnt! It was a warm, bright flame like a candle as she held her hands over it. It was a wonderful light. It seemed really to the little maiden as though she were sitting in front of a large iron stove with burnished brass feet and a brass ornament on top. The fire burned with such blessed influence. It warmed her so delightfully. The little girl had already stretched out her feet to warm them too, but the small flame went out. The stove vanished. She only had the remains of the burnt-out match in her hand. She rubbed another against the wall. It burned brightly, and where the light fell on the wall became transparent, like a veil. She could see into the room on the other side. On the table was spread a snow-white tablecloth. Upon it was a splendid porcelain tea set, and the roast goose was steaming famously with its stuffing of apple and dried plums. And what was still more incredible to behold was the goose hopped down from the dish, reeled about on the floor with a knife and fork in its breast, till it came up to the little girl. Then the match went out, and nothing but the thick, cold, damp wall was left behind. She lit another match. Now, there she was sitting under the most magnificent Christmas tree. It was larger and more decorated than the one which she had seen through the glass door in the rich merchant's house. Thousands of lights were burning on the green branches. Gaily colored pictures like she had seen in the shop windows looked down upon her. The little maiden stretched out her hands towards them when the match went out. The lights of the Christmas tree rose higher and higher. She saw them now as stars in heaven. One fell down and formed a long trail of fire. "Someone has just died," said the little girl. Her grandmother, the only person who had ever really loved her, and who was now no more, had told her that when a star falls, a soul ascends to God. She drew another match against the wall. It was again light, and in the luster there stood her grandmother, so bright and radiant, so mild and with such an expression of love.
"Grandmother!" cried the little one. "Oh, take me with you! You go away when the match burns out. You vanish like the warm stove, like the delicious roast goose, and like the magnificent Christmas tree."
She rubbed the whole bundle of matches quickly against the wall, for she wanted to be quite sure of keeping her grandmother near her. The matches gave such a brilliant light that it was brighter than noon. Her grandmother had never been so beautiful and so tall. She took the little maiden under her arm, and both flew up in brightness and in joy, so high, so very, very high. Then, above was neither cold, nor hunger, nor anxiety. They were with God. But in the corner, at the cold hour of dawn, sat the poor girl with rosy, ice-covered cheeks, and with a purple and frosty smiling mouth, leaning against the wall, frozen to death on the last evening before Christmas. Stiff and stark sat the child there with her matches, of which one bundle had been burnt. "She wanted to warm herself," people said. No one had the slightest suspicion of what beautiful things she had seen. She had entered on the joys of a new continuance with her grandmother, the splendor of which no one had ever dreamed.